changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark with your daily dose of Chicken Soup for the Soul inspiration. It's Thoughtful Thursday, and that means I get to share a story with you, one that made me think and that gave me a useful new perspective. And this story is from Priscilla Dan Courtney, who was one of my very best friends in my childhood. I had actually lost track of her until about 10 years ago when I found her on the internet. She's a psychologist now, and she also happens to be a fabulous writer, and she's written a bunch of great stories for Chicken Soup for the Soul. The first story she wrote for us was published in 2008 in Chicken Soup for the Soul, My Resolution, and the story is called The Resolution of Silence. I love this story. I think it is a wonderful perspective changer. Is your house your boss or your haven? You decide after you hear about Priscilla's own epiphany. Priscilla lives in Boulder, Colorado, and I think that already makes her cooler than me. And she does three things that I don't do. She's a runner, she does yoga, and she does meditation. So for her 50th birthday, she decided to go to a meditation center for a 10-day silent yoga retreat. Yeah, 10 days of yoga and no talking. Not for me, but it worked for her. So except for the first evening when they were allowed to talk and get to know each other and the yoga master, they were going to be silent. And that first evening, the yoga master explained that they would be silent for the rest of the 10 days because she wanted them to listen to themselves. And she said that in your daily lives, talking to people can be distractions from honest conversations with yourself. Quiet lets us listen to our inner voices. So Priscilla and her fellow campers, I'll call them, were expected to be silent during the day and only speak if absolutely necessary. Staying silent was difficult, but as the days passed, Priscilla found that it was indeed true. She was figuring out important things, changes she wanted to make in her life. One thing she realized was that her back and shoulder pain was probably a result of all the stress she was under to achieve, to get more clients, more money, more accomplishments. Priscilla and I both grew up in a town outside New York City where everyone was very accomplished. Everyone was upwardly mobile. Priscilla's own father was a senior television executive at CBS. He was known throughout the television industry. And Priscilla realized that she was always pushing herself. She and her husband worked long hours, and they took care of their 3 children, their very energetic puppy, and their large home. They loved that large home, but keeping it up in terms of chores and paying for it wasn't giving them any space in their lives, even though they had space in their home. Priscilla was allowed to call home once a day from that retreat, and so she started sharing her thoughts with her husband about how maybe they should have a simpler life, a smaller home, maybe she could have a smaller patient caseload. She had just turned 50, and she wanted to live her next 50 years differently. So when Priscilla got home, she and her husband decided that they would sell their home and move a block away to a lovely yet smaller home. Their 3 children were not happy about it, but they got used to it eventually. And now, without the burden of that big house, Priscilla and her husband work less. And of course, that's been to the benefit of Chicken Soup for the Soul because now Priscilla has more time to write. And her husband has time to garden. And with fewer patients, Priscilla gets to take a daily yoga class. In fact, she wears yoga clothes to work now. She doesn't even bother to wear her old work clothes. She says she's very grateful for that silent retreat when she stopped talking long enough to listen to her own thoughts. So, what do you think? Is your house your boss? Or is it, as it should be, your haven? I know that when I first married my second husband 16 years ago, he suggested that we move into a bigger, grander house. And we looked at some places, but my heart wasn't in it. I didn't want the responsibility of that bigger, grander house. So we stayed put in our smaller, more manageable house, and I have never regretted it. because my house remained my haven. It didn't turn into my burden. I'm Amy Newmark. Thank you for listening to the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast today. And please tell your friends and family about it. And if you'd like to read more stories today by my friend Priscilla Dan Courtney, or from the book I mentioned today, Chicken Soup for the Soul, My Resolution, please go to our website, chickensoup.com. Now, tomorrow is Friend Friday, and I'm going to introduce you to one of our story writers, Kathy Caprino, who has an interesting story about her career. Let's just say she went from breakdown to breakthrough.